Today I'm going to talk about why making a kombucha recipe from scratch may or may not be the best or worst idea ever, and what that means to you. So first let's define what I think the words kombucha recipe from scratch is, and that is making kombucha without a kombucha mushroom or kombucha culture and without some kombucha starter tea, which means already brewed kombucha tea, right? So first off, making kombucha using a culture but without starter tea, not the worst thing. An easy solution for that is using some white distilled vinegar. See, the main purpose of the starter tea is when you first start brewing kombucha, it's tea, right? If you ever left tea out at room temperature for a little bit, or even left a tea bag out, like in tea or something, you come back a few hours the next day, you're gonna see mold, okay? There's a reason why most foods are preserved not at room temperature, okay? Usually we preserve foods either by raising the temperature, like a chafing dish or something, like an oven, crock pot, or we lower the temperature like a refrigerator. There are some exceptions to those rules, right? And those exceptions are, well, alcohol, vinegar, and things that are fermenting usually in an anaerobic fermentation. So when you're brewing beer or wine, let's say, its sterilization is so important. Why? Because the first couple of days, it's essentially just, if we're talking about beer, it's just like grain and barley in water with a bunch of, malt extract. Now through the yeasts and through fermentation, that pH drops and it acts as a preservative. Kombucha is an anaerobic and aerobic fermentation, okay? Aerobic means it's breathing, and there's natural airborne stuff going on right now in this room that I'm talking to you. So it's important that when you brew kombucha, you have enough starter liquid to have that pH low, right? Just to kind of give it for the first couple of days. Eventually, when you drink kombucha, when it's ready to bottle, it should be around anywhere from like 2.5, let's say, to I say 3, 2.5 to 3 is a very acceptable pH range. Speak to most food scientists, it's very hard to get pathogens in the pH that's below 3 or 3 or below. So if you don't have starter liquid, one, I guess why? Because if you purchase from any reputable kombucha company, they should ship a culture with enough starter liquid to not only make sure your culture is viable, but to also brew your kombucha tea. And if you got it from a friend, they should be able to give you some of their kombucha tea to get started off with. So my concern is more on a culture. Now, you can produce a culture using a kombucha recipe from scratch without a culture, okay? So what I mean is, if you follow all the directions and you make a recipe of kombucha, boiled tea, add a bottle of kombucha, to the tea and sugar, in a few days from then, you actually might see a culture growing. But is that really the only sign of what kombucha is? See, what that layer is, from a material point of view, is cellulose, okay? Now, inside that cellulose is a symbiotic colony of yeast and bacteria, and very specific types of yeast and very specific types of bacteria. The problem we get into is that people see a beautiful culture, this really white, beautiful culture, and they say, oh, this is a magnificent, healthy, nutritious kombucha drink. So what I'm saying to you is, yes, a culture could be a sign of a healthy kombucha tea, but it's not always a sign, and it's not always the sign to measure. In my experience, and I've tried both ways of brewing with and without, the tea brewed with a culture will ensure a healthier tea. One way to do this is get it tested, get your tea tested. If you don't want to do that, trust your gut, so to speak, and just drink one brewed with the culture and drink one without. But I guess what I'm saying is just the risk of contamination and the probability of leaving up the chance of what I have here now, is it really kombucha tea with all the gluconic acids and all the organic acids that brewing with a culture, would ensure, is it really the same, and is it really worth it of just picking up a culture from a site or from a friend? Hopefully that answers your question. Can I make kombucha from scratch using a kombucha recipe without a culture? That is a long question.